What's up guys, my name is Ace, and today I wanted to go through the settings that we have for the beta in Modern Warfare and share the settings that I feel are best to use throughout the beta. Of course, some of these will change as I actually get into the game and get some playtime. This is being recorded before the servers go live. I still don't know if those servers are going to go on early. By the time this video even comes out, the servers may or may not be on. But since we're waiting here and a lot of people have been asking about the settings, I wanted to go through this. And just so you know, if the servers aren't online yet, you can access these settings if you plug a keyboard into your PS4 and then you just hit F3 within the menus. You might have to hit it a couple times. That will actually take you to the settings page without the servers being on. If the servers are on, then you don't have to worry about that. But let's go through this, keeping in mind these are going to be for controller. And first off, we have the controller tab. And let's just go through this. For button layout, personally, I am a tactical player. I like having all of that control of being able to crouch and go prone without having to take my thumb off of the aiming stick. So tactical is what I always go with, but of course, just use what you're comfortable with. When it comes to sensitivity, of course, this is something you'll have to tweak as time goes on. What I feel like I'm going to start with here is going to be an 8 and 8 sensitivity, and then I really like reducing my aim down sight sensitivity, which is so awesome to see they have it included for the beta. Really happy to see this change. I like reducing my ADS sensitivity and having a sensitivity that's a bit higher than I would normally use. This allows me to spin around really quickly when I'm not aiming down sight, but with the reduced aim down sight sensitivity, that gives me more precision when I am aiming down sight. So this is what I'll start with. I will be tweaking it a little bit as time goes on, but that's where I'm going to be at least. I always turn controller vibration off, but that's personal preference as well. Now let's get into the aim assist. They have changed up the description of the different aim assist values here, so we can get into it a bit more. Keep in mind, I will be going into this with much greater detail when I can actually get some proper testing in custom games, which won't be until we get the full build of the game. But we have several options here. We have disabled, standard, precision, and focusing. So standard is the normal aim assist that we're used to in Call of Duty. Precision is strong aim slowdown that only kicks in when aiming closer to a target, which is best for accurate players. And then we have focusing, which is strong aim slowdown that also kicks in when narrowly missing a target, best for players new to analog aiming. So with precision, by the looks of it, this one doesn't kick in. It doesn't have as big of a bubble around the enemy player before it actually kicks in and starts slowing your aim down, but it's going to have a stronger slowdown from the sounds of it. This means if you're pretty good at getting on target in the first place, this one is probably going to be a better bet for you. And also from the sounds of it, it shouldn't pull your aim away as easily if a different enemy runs in front of your line of sight. So this may actually be a good bet for players that are already fairly confident with their aiming. As for focusing, this still requires more testing. It is a bit of a better description than they had in the alpha, but with this one, it mentions that the slowdown that kicks in when narrowly missing a target. It specifically says slowdown, which if you guys didn't know, that's when your aim sweeps across an enemy. Your sensitivity effectively slows down as you're sweeping across that enemy. This isn't referring to snapping onto target. This doesn't actually lock onto the target for you, at least based on this description. So my speculation in the alpha was if you aim near an enemy, it will give you a little bit of a snapping effect that will help you get on the target. I'm not so sure about that anymore with this newer description. Additionally, some people were saying this could be bullet magnetism, so if you actually shoot just off target, then it will still count as a hit, like that bullet will magnetize towards the enemy target. Again, it doesn't really seem that that's the case based on this description, but it's going to require more testing. I'm going to definitely play around with these 3 different options throughout the beta, but like I said, we won't have proper testing until we get custom games. Next up is something I've been getting a ton of questions about. This is the aim response curve, which by the way is so awesome to see in Call of Duty. This is something we don't normally see in COD. And this is basically how your aim will react when it comes to different movements with your analog stick. We have 3 different options. We have standard, which is that normal response curve for Call of Duty, which personally I really like Call of Duty's standard response curve, and therefore I'm probably just going to stick with standard. But we also have linear. Now linear means it's raw input. That means no matter how much you're moving your stick, you're going to get the same reaction out of your aim. If you move it just a little bit versus moving your stick all the way to the edge as far as it can possibly go, your aim and your sensitivity is going to react identically between those two. A lot of people really like raw input because it gives you a really consistent feeling. However, this can come at a trade-off of having precision based on how much you're moving your analog stick. And therefore, I'm personally going to stay away from linear, but I know a lot of people will like this. Maybe you will as well. I'd say it's worth a shot. And finally, we have dynamic, which is a reverse S-curve mapping for fine aim rate control. This one, from the sounds of it, is going to be if you barely move your analog stick just a little bit, then your aim will barely move just a little bit. But if you take your analog stick all the way to the extreme while aiming, then you will have a very fast sensitivity. It will ramp up quite considerably. This is an option that I don't feel will be very popular. Some people might like it, but I'd be willing to bet this is going to feel way too weird for too many people, and most people won't like this one. So let's move on in the settings. Those were the ones that really required the most explanation. When it comes to weapon mounting, some people will like having it mount on ADS. So if you're just near cover and you hit the aim down sight button, you will automatically mount to that surface. I think I'm going to keep it on ADS plus melee, so you have to hit another button to mount, so then I'm not accidentally mounting on all kinds of surfaces. As for weapon mount movement exit, this is something I found in the alpha. I like disabling this. This means if you are mounted on an object and you accidentally press the strafe button a little bit, like you move your left analog stick a little, it won't cause you to dismount from that surface accidentally. As for the aim down sight behavior, of course, I'm going to leave that on hold. Same with equipment behavior. You probably want to leave those on hold unless you're really weird. Use and reload behavior. This is a really good option to see. This is especially going to apply to the OSP mode in 2v2 gunfight. And this makes it so when you're going to pick up a gun that's on the ground, you can either tap to reload and hold to use that item and hold to pick that item up, or you can tap to use and hold to reload. So if you want to pick that gun up really quickly, you just tap square and it'll pick the gun up. But if you ever want to reload your gun, you have to hold square, which isn't really ideal for me. Personally, I'm going with the contextual tap. This is the one where it's going to be tap to reload or use, so you can pick things up really quickly with just a tap, but you can also reload really quickly with just a tap. But it should prioritize things when possible. So if you're standing on top of a gun, but you're trying to reload your gun, it should prioritize reloading over tapping to pick up that weapon. Also, if you want to make sure that you're going to reload instead of picking up, then you can hold the reload button and that'll ensure that you do that. So again, this is going to be an area where it is personal preference, but I feel like contextual tap will be a very popular choice for people. So that's pretty much it for the controller settings as far as what I'm going to be changing. Let's move into the general settings. Obviously, we're going to be using a controller here, but you could use keyboard and mouse. We now have a bunch of options for keyboard and mouse, which is great to see. Film grain is something that I absolutely always recommend disabling. You're going to get a more clear image out of that, and therefore you're going to be able to see things a little bit better in some situations, especially dark situations I've found. Next up, we're going to be scrolling down here. We don't need to change many of these, but motion blur, I highly encourage you guys to turn both of the motion blur settings off. If you sweep your aim across when you have motion blur on, you are losing valuable information, and therefore, especially with the world motion blur, make sure you disable that. I highly encourage you to do that. The weapon motion blur, I mean, you can do what you want with that, but again, I prefer that being disabled. And we now have a dismemberment setting, and by default, it's disabled, so if you want to see some arms fly off, then definitely enable that option, and I'm interested to see how that looks. Moving on to audio. For the audio mixes, assuming these are going to be the same or at least very similar to the alpha, I would recommend either headphones 1 or TV 1 for the optimal mix. These are the ones that just definitely work the best for me. When it comes to these volume meters, I personally love turning the music volume down significantly or even off altogether. I'm probably going to set it at roughly like 70%. And this is just so if you get those little music cues when you're in an actual game, they won't be as distracting from the actual gameplay cues that you may need. Another really cool setting that they added here is you can change your hit marker sound. You can turn hit marker sounds completely off if that's something you like, which I know some people like that. You can also get that classic Infinity Ward hit marker sound, which I'm looking forward to seeing what that feels like and looks like when you're actually in this game. And then, of course, you can have the standard Modern Warfare hit marker sound, which I personally like quite a bit in the alpha. Next up, I just wanted to show that you can change a ton of mouse and keyboard settings this time around, which we couldn't do in the alpha, which is awesome if you guys wanted to try out mouse and keyboard. And finally, this leaves us to the account options, and this is something that's interesting and has a lot of people concerned. You can disable crossplay if you want here. And this just completely disables it, so you can only play with your platform. So if you disable it, I will only play against PlayStation users, which of course we all will only be playing against PlayStation users for the first week of the beta. But this is something we're going to have to wait until next week. Next week is when they mentioned they're going to go into great detail with all of the different situations and stuff with exactly how crossplay will work. They've already explained a lot of how crossplay will work, like it's going to be input based, for instance, but we don't know every little detail on how it's going to react to every situation. So make sure you stay tuned for next week where they will describe that a lot better. But for me, I am going to leave that enabled even throughout the second weekend of the beta. I will leave that enabled because it'll just maximize the pool of players you get to play against, which I think is great. But with that, that's going to wrap it up for today's video on all of the settings that we have access to in the beta build of this game. And I'm really happy to see that they filled out so many settings compared to what we saw in the alpha. The alpha was pretty disappointing when it came to settings, and the beta is not disappointing me at all based on what we've seen so far. But with that, I'd like to know in the comment section below, what are you guys thinking about all of these different settings options that we have in the beta build of the game? Are there some settings you still think are missing and you'd like to see for the full build of the game? Or are you pretty happy with this selection? Just let me know those thoughts in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.
They're willing to die for their mission, so be it.
Yeah.